if that applies outside of California.
We've done it in New York, in Chicago. So I think legally, if you're applying to use them,
Sure.
but we'll see how we release it.
Yeah, yeah.
I never see the things ever turn up anywhere, even when they do film it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it's for.
That should be bad.
Little on here.
Everybody, everybody can hear us? Mic check down the line.
Hello.
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 We good?
They're not on.
Now we're good?
Yes, they
All
are.
right.
Now
Mic
they're
check
on.
down the line.
Yes. Hello.
Hello, hello. Can you hear us in the back?
I don't
Hand
think
up.
this
Hello,
one's
hello.
on.
In the back, raise your hand. We're good? More
It's not
volume?
that big a room.
We got a request for more
Just
volume from the
holler
back.
if need be, guys.
All right. We'll try to project like in the theater. Hey, everybody, welcome to, it's Comics Writers on Writing, correct? Yeah, it says right here, Comic Writers on Writing.
I hope so.
That's what it says on the back of my name.
And we're going to talk about writing comics with this illustrious panel of comic book writers. To my right immediately, Jay Faerber, who writes Anti-Hero for Monkey Brain, Near Death, and Dynamite 5 for Image Comics. Next to him is Eric Stephenson, the publisher at Image Comics and the writer of Nowhere Men, also published by Image Comics. Next to him is Antony Johnston, who writes Wasteland, The Fuse, and Umbral, correct?
Yep.
And that's for several different publishers, am I correct?
Wasteland is only the Fuse and Umbrella are Image.
There you go. You guys all heard that? Good. And next to him is, what's that? Point your mouths at the microphones, gentlemen.
Wow.
We're supposed to talk into these?
Mine
Get
just
get real tight on those mics. And next to him is Jeff Parker, who writes Batman 66 and Aquaman for DC, and wrote the miniseries Mysteriously Unfathomable and Underground for Image Comics, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
This isn't on. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we're going to talk about writing comics, and I want to start with you guys. And before you start writing anything, you have an idea, correct? The idea comes to you. We're not going to talk about where the ideas come from because that's not worth going into. But
Wait, I wasn't paying attention. What did you say?
first, you get an idea. The light bulb pops over your head. Who do you talk to about that idea? Do you have a person that you talk to? Do you kibitz over that idea before you put pen to paper or finger to keyboard?
I don't.
You don't, really?
Because sometimes if you go tell the idea to somebody, the impetus to make the thing goes away.
Yes, for sure.
But sometimes if I've just got half a germ of an idea that I just want to sound out because it won't form until I start talking, yeah, then I'll do that.
You're in a studio, right? You're at Periscope Studios?
I'm at Periscope
So you're
Studio.
surrounded by people.
Right.
And there's no instinct, not instinct, but you're not sort of tempted to say, hey, what do you think of this?
Oh, well, yeah, I do that.
Okay.
I'll sometimes, if I get stuck, and it's usually just I'm stuck on a scene,
Right.
right, I'll come out and I'll start babbling about it. And then a lot of times I'll solve it in the middle of my
Sure.
little rant. But then somebody, Steve Lieber or somebody will say, what about this? And, we do the same thing back. He's trying to come up with Superior Foes cover, and then who hasn't been stewing on it forever, can walk up with something fresh.
Fresh eyes, sure.
Yeah.
So in the initial idea phase, Jay, you come up with these high concepts, a superhero whose identity is compromised, and what happens from there? Do you run that by someone? What do you think of this idea? These are some of the beats I have for where stories can go.
Yeah, I mean, it's usually just the premise. I'll usually run by a couple people and just, what do you think of this? There's this idea that I have. What do you think?
Yeah.
And then from there, then the actual writing is usually.
Solitary.
Oh yeah.
And then do you guys show drafts at all to anybody, or?
I do, yeah. I know that like when I was first working on Nowhere Men, I would constantly show that to people. I know I showed you.
Yeah.
And would just say, hey, what is this stupid?
Right.
Basically that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I mean everybody does that, right? No.
Well, I like to think it's a finished script, but it's apparently treated as a draft once I turn it in. And then they come back with notes. And then
Certainly if you have an
address the
editor,
notes.
you're showing it to them. I mean, they're going to go through it.
But you don't show it to people before an editor?
No.
No.
There's no time. You know that.
I
think you work in a different environment than I do.
I work at home, and I don't talk to anybody about anything until it's done, basically.
Now, do you talk to your artists about?
Not really.
Really?
I mean, you know, in sort of the initial creation stages, if there's something I think, you know, that I need to talk to them about visually, then yeah.
Sure.
But for the most part, no. If I'm going to sort of interrogate anybody, I interrogate myself. I just, your equivalent of talking it out, I just write it out. And that's how I find problems and, you know, sort of snags and things. I'll literally just start writing stuff down. All my thoughts kind of spill onto the page, and I spot problems.
I've done that. I've like tricked myself into doing that. Like I'm stuck on a story, and so I'll write an email to a friend about it, to another writer, and describe to him what the story is so far, to describe my problem. But 9 times out of 10,
While you're
in
doing
doing that,
that,
I fix it anyway, and I never need to send the email. So it's kind of a trickier way of what
Yeah.
you're talking about,
Well,
just writing it.
I just made a note from what Jeff was saying. Talk to the duck is an old software programming trick. I can't remember who actually called it that, who came up with it, but the idea was there was some, you know, it might even have been like John Carmack or something, some hotshot software developer who always told his programmers if they had a problem, he had this like toy duck in the studio, and they should just, instead of talking to him about it, they should just go to the duck and tell the duck what their problem is. And in doing so, 9 times out of 10, they figured out the solution.
Isn't this
by
with
themselves.
Alan Moore and the Snake God?
No.
thing?
Very different. Very
Okay,
different.
sure.
Ducks, snakes, mortal,
Yeah, you're
mortal
right.
enemies since the dawn of time.
When you brought up the talking to the artists, like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, wait, in the brainstorming stage, I often, especially when I'm starting to work with an artist, I just ask them, can you tell me some stuff you would really like to draw, so I don't typecast you into things I've already seen, which happens to artists a lot.
Sure.
And then I say, and please tell me things you really hate drawing, and I will not go there because I don't want to make them miserable. They got to spend so much more time on a page than I do. You know?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, in terms of talking to artists, too, like especially, I know for me, like the further Nate and I got into doing the book, we text a lot, and then also we'll be on like iChat and stuff. And usually it's like he'll send pages over, and there'll be something in one of the pages that'll make me think of something else, and so we'll start texting about that. I was like, hey, why did you put this in here? This is like something that something that wasn't in in the script necessarily, and that will kind of spur me on to think of something else. And so then we'll start texting back and forth about it, to the point that like the plot or the script actually becomes just like kind of like your, not a rough draft, but kind of like a base document. Yeah, like a starting point. What's that?
Roadmap?
A roadmap. Yeah. Yes. Then it's like kind of the conversations we have after that are kind of like expand on all of that. So.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say I've been really lucky in that I did that actually with both Fuse and Umbral. I said to Chris and Justin, like, what do you want to draw? What do you want to do? And they both just came back and said, don't really care as long as it's good. I'm like, okay, no pressure then, you know.
So before the story goes to your artist, we'll get sort of procedural here. I kind of want to talk about how you're writing your stories. So basically, I guess in TV terms, it'd be breaking your stories. How are you have your overall premise, you get a sense of beginning, middle, and end, I presume. How do you break it down, particularly when you're doing serialized comics that may or may not have a ending in place, or you may have it or not, but you have to sort of, you string it along. Are you approaching it as a 3-act structure and then breaking that amidst issues? Are you treating it like a series, a TV series, something where there's the cliffhanger is the thing that you're following, or basically how are you constructing your stories again before you even start typing or writing? Is there an answer to this question? Do you just stare in space? Do you eat a pita?
I tend to build in layers. I'll, rough out. I do all this stuff longhand before, getting to the computer. And I tend to just write out something really rough and vague. And if that makes sense, then I'll start to fill in a few more details. And if it still makes sense, then a few more details. And I just sort of build it in layers.
So it's sort of like an outline that just gets
gets
filled out
in.
more and more.
Yeah, kind of.
It's
yeah.
almost like if you're drawing, you start with a skeletal structure and start
Right,
and building from that.
And long term, it depends on what sort of series it is. Like the Fuse, I'm plotting very much like a TV series, but Umbral is more like a sort of novel, almost, really.
All right, Eric.
Yeah, I start with just like having the overall premise and like where I want to get to, and then I start just kind of compiling notes and like for Norman, I have like a number of books that are just like filled up with ideas and like this, and then bits of dialogue and stuff like that, and then it becomes kind of like, what do I want to happen at each point? So
Sure.
yeah.
Jeff, you drew your own comic for a long time.
Yeah.
The Interman. So you are a cartoonist.
Yeah.
When you're breaking down a story, do you ever start thumbnailing, or are you now?
Sometimes, once in a while, I try to, whenever I'm working on an issue, I just try to find any entry point that comes to me first. And sometimes it will be just like some images come to me, I'll doodle those, especially if I can't describe it in a way that, I don't want Paul Pelletier or somebody or Jonathan Case to just be agonizing over what I'm trying to describe when I could just sketch it out. And then and then you take it to the next 6 levels. And sometimes just dialogue will come to you, and sometimes just plot will come to you. And whatever is coming to you, I say just jump in there and let it, guessing roughly where it comes in the story, and then start filling in seems to be one way to get me going right off the bat. And I use like a page template where it's like, now most of the monthly comics are about 20 pages, and I'll have like this thing, I'll just have page 1 and going all the way through 20, and then I have an average of 5 panels a page. So it just says panel 1, nothing, character 1, character 2. And then I use that so that there's not void on the screen, and it's like it's already a little skeleton, even though nothing's really happened yet. And everything, you have to make yourself feel momentum, and that just revs you up to do more and to start putting it all down. Because really, it doesn't matter what you write at first. You can go through, you can just write, have them say horrible filler dialogue. I do that all the time. Just definitely go change it to good dialogue. Just like, and I've caught myself sometimes, and it's funny for the editors when they find something where it's something like, Ben Grimm's making a joke. And they're like, oh yeah, I forgot to put the joke in there. But you know the feeling that you're going for. It's like, I want a little levity in this scene, or I want things to start getting dour.
And
No.
I was going to. Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
No, you
go.
go
Because I was going to ask Jay a question.
Yeah, what
so.
you were saying too is it's like a lot of times, sometimes just an image will come into your head. It's like, even if you have an overall idea like what's going to be happening in that issue, sometimes like you're like, okay, this pops into my head, and so I need to find a place to put that. And sometimes that's what like winds up starting off the issue, or it's like a good image for like how to end the issue.
Sure.
It's good to not do the same thing every time.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's good for you. And what you brought up, Eric, about once you see the art and then suddenly it spurs something you weren't anticipating. I do that all the time where characters, where suddenly somebody draws a character and like, whoa, that character turned out way more interesting than the little vague rough I had in my head. And then suddenly that character starts running around. They literally take a life of their own because they start doing more in the story because I want to see them now. And I feel it's kind of like a game theory sort of thing where you're defying a plot order. So I think that's pretty exciting.
Well, and in terms of what you were saying about not having a blank page, I mean, I think it's probably safe to assume that the audience of a panel like this, most of you are interested in the process of writing or are writers yourselves. If there's one, and I say this to a lot of people, because frankly, I'm pretty sure everybody on this panel would say we all forget this from time to time as well. It is so much easier to rewrite something than to write fresh onto a blank page. Filling that blank page is the hardest part. So you just fill it with any old crap. It does not matter. The dialogue can be crap. The panel descriptions are wrong. A lot of the time, I don't even put panel descriptions in when I'm just roughing out. I call that the zero draft, where it's just notes about images and bits of dialogue. And then you go through and rewrite it, and the rewriting is so much easier. And it's so easy to forget that sometimes. So
every page should build and advance your story. Something, even when it seems like nothing happened on that page, something happened on that page. And you've got to, what you can do is you can just sit there, write down 1 to 20, and you can say on page 1, we see the castle, and then we go to the dungeon. And then page 2, and just go through page by page, do a page breakdown. Editors often will just make you do this anyway, so they're very helpful that way. And then you start, once you get into it, you realize it's the same thing in miniature with each panel. Each panel's got to be, and if it's not advancing things, what's it there for? It's not really doing anything. not, if it's just there to be clever, that's probably not a good enough reason.
And
Yeah,
Jay,
I read somewhere that the first draft is just you telling the story to yourself, and that is kind of freeing to like, no one's going to see this.
Right,
it can
right,
be as
yeah,
bad
nobody
as
ever
it
sees
needs
it,
to
yeah.
be. It's just a starting point, so you're not looking at that blank screen.
now Jay, I've seen you post on Twitter photos of a process where you have it's index cards, the different colors. What's happening there?
Yeah, I mean that's more TV stuff.
Right,
that's,
but it was for a comic. I think you were using. At least the tweet seemed.
Was it?
I think
Such
so.
a TV guy now. You don't even.
I can't read.
I know, man. You are.
That was probably. I'm trying to think if I wrote any comic book in that method.
So the TV stuff doesn't bleed over as much.
Not in
procedurally.
that. Not in that breaking, because it's all about acts 1 through 6 and what's going to fit in what act. And TV in comics doesn't have that constraint. So it's,
So when you guys are writing comics, do you think in terms of acts, and do you think in terms of first act, second act, third act in the classic sense, or does it change when you're dealing with this will be collected into a trade, so each issue plays a different game than it used to, or what have you?
I mean, I know it's a dirty word to write for the trade, but I do. I mean, I try to think about what the.
Well, no, and
what's gonna
and
read.
everybody kind of should. I mean, it's one of the things that when I talk to other writers that we work with, I think a big part of the success of The Walking Dead and also Saga are that both Brian and Robert write for the trade, and it's I think they do a very good job of not just writing for the trade, but they also every part of that trade works on its own as a single issue. But then you get to the end of that trade, and you're like, oh, I want to come back for.
Yeah.
A, the next issue, or B, the next trade. And Robert has been particularly good about not just writing for the trade, but then writing for the larger hardcover collection, so that like everything has this like perfect breaking point, so that they're bringing you back to the next thing. And yeah, it's I think kind of a different structure than like the 3-act
Yeah.
thing.
Sure.
I've worked with 3 acts occasionally doing graphic novels, like
Right.
like 180-page done
Right,
in one
yeah, yeah.
books. But even then, I've only worked with the sort of traditional 3-act structure once or twice. Most of the time, I treat them more like an actual novel where you have like 3 or 4 major turning points rather than just your central thing.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff, you're writing continuing series, but something like Mysterious, which had a finite ending.
Yeah.
Are you mapping the whole thing out as a tapestry and then breaking it into 4 or 5 parts? There's 5 parts, right? Or
Six.
Yeah.
6.
And then do you break that along act structures, or are you saying, doing the thing where each issue has its own adventure and it all ties together?
It's a weird thing to think in terms of acts, even though you can later break it up into acts, because ultimately if you say, beginning, middle, and end, 3 acts. But I think, and I'm sorry to, again, compare it to a different medium.
That's fair.
But TV probably, and now that TV's good, compares a little better, because you can turn it like you said, you're talking about 6 acts, and you can make this anything you want to. If you want to break it up and have some crazy 10-act thing, you can do that, as long as you know what you're doing. My main thing is I figure out the ending early on,
Okay.
because I have to know what I'm going to, and also I like a really good ending. I've read so many things in my life where it's like, this was such a great ride, and then they didn't know how to end it, and you see that all the time. And to me,
It's a bad dessert ruining a meal.
thank you.
Right?
You're good at that. So to me, it's very important to deliver on that ending. And I'm like, okay, and a lot of times I will start the story, I'll skip to the ending and write that, or write a rough of it to make sure, like, here's how long it's going to take, here's what I want to happen. And sure, yeah, I'll go back. I'll often find I'm going to veer off along the way to get there and have to change the ending. But generally, I end up being pretty close to what I planned when I go back and look at my notes. I would advise everybody to do that. Sometimes you do, later after you've written a ton of stuff, you do trust yourself to land the plane. You just like, you know what? I know how a story works. I got to make this interesting and surprising for myself, so it's interesting and surprising for the readers. So I am going to throw myself some curves and force myself to get out of it, and then we'll see if I can actually end it. I've never stuck myself. So, I guess somewhere my subconscious is helping me out and trying to do me a solid.
Well, no, and it goes back to what you were saying too about the roadmap analogy.
Yeah.
It's like having a map is useless if you don't know where you're going.
Yeah.
So it's like it does help to kind of like, okay, I know I'm going to get here, and it doesn't matter which route you take to get there.
Right.
Yeah.
You ever seen a story where someone just suddenly shifts genres, and it's not in that cool Coen Brothers way, where they like, whoa, that No Country for Old Men was something different by the end than I thought it was at the beginning. No, some people get into it and they don't really know what their story is.
Right.
And then it's suddenly like, what? Everybody's using magic? What? And the obvious detective that I think almost everybody thing is True Detective, because everybody watched it. And so many people wanted that to be a Lost, like supernatural kind of thing. It was like, but they weren't doing that at the beginning. There's nothing establishing that it's going to be like that, and it would have been really weird had it suddenly become that. So that doesn't mean you can't throw some surprises at people, but know what kind of story you're telling. And know the tone is very important. We should get into that at some point.
So to the structure of knowing your ending, a lot of you guys have written things that don't the creator-owned stuff, you know where your ending is going to go. But even with Noble Causes or Dynamo 5, or you're writing Aquaman, there's no ending.
It never ends.
It never ends,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and Eric,
Jumps
you
back
wrote-
in the water and swims off. That's what happens.
Aquaman ends every 2 years.
or Eric, you were writing
in his
Extreme
real
Studios
sense, yeah.
books. I mean, there was no ending to these stories. You sort of had to create mini endings within, but still never end anything.
Well, no, but I mean, I think with stuff like that, I mean, it's like if you go back and look at like what Lee and Kirby were doing on Fantastic Four, way back when.
Sure.
Like that never ended, but they would tell like little stories within the
Yeah, like
framework. I mean, it's like everybody's life. It's like your life doesn't end until you die.
That's
but it's
true.
like there's little things that happen in your life that are like little stories.
Yeah.
They would end a story in the middle of a book. I was always fascinated by that. It's like,
well, like
this
everyone
story
always-
just ended, and we're on page 12.
No, well, like everyone talks about the first time Galactus showed up, and it's like the first half of that issue is the resolution of a story with the Inhumans,
Yeah.
and then you start the Galactus story, and then like the third issue of that, I think, it ends in the middle, and then they start off on something else, and it's like they used to do that all the time.
Yeah. I like it.
I mean,
thought
and
it
that's
was
more like how life is. It's like everything's like going back to like the 3-act thing and stuff like that. It's like
Yeah.
not everything's neatly structured that way.
Yeah, it
Things
breaks
kinda
you
just,
out
like,
of thinking,
happen.
I am reading a story.
Right.
You're just like, I'm being pulled along, and that's kind of a good thing to pull off if you can.
That's fair. So now you mentioned tone
Yeah.
and finding the tone for your story.
Tone is super important to what you're doing. And it's a hard, well, maybe it's just hard for me to explain, and maybe Jay will save me. But tone is everything, and it's like one of my favorite examples in recent years. I worked on the Thunderbolts, and I worked with Kev Walker and Declan Shalvey. And when Kev and I were thrown together, we had never worked together before, and I didn't know what it was going to be like. And I had some ideas of where I wanted to take it. But as soon as he started drawing, and I realized he was doing this kind of Jamie Hewlett meets Mike Mignola kind of style that, like, it was over the top, yet you could still go heavy and have some gravity with it. And I was like, and it established the tone so thoroughly, it let me do stuff. I could do extreme humor, and then I could do just something scary. And it's all because his style allowed me to do that. So the tone of the stories tended to follow that. It's like, it wasn't going to read like another book I was working on. It was going to, like, these characters are going to take things a bit too far. Someone's going to do something horribly mean. That's the kind of thing you can pull off now with this, even though they're all wearing these outrageous outfits and flying around shooting lasers out of their eyes.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of that does actually come down to choice of artist as
Right,
well.
right,
Yeah.
definitely.
And whether that's a choice you make or a choice you have thrust upon you, I think it does. Can you imagine, I don't know, say Next Wave drawn by Ron Lim? It just, it wouldn't, it would not be.
Wow, are we like naming names?
I'm just saying, it's,
Well, you definitely can't
I'm just
force
saying it
it
would
to
be
be
a very,
something
very
that you
different
can't
book,
achieve. I've seen very failed books do that, where people try to make the writers plunging ahead with like what they want the book to be, but that's not the right artist
Yeah,
for it.
yeah, exactly.
And you go into battle with the army you have, not
yeah,
your
this is
wish
not a
army.
value judgment. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
you've got to bear that in mind.
Wait,
yeah.
and I mean, sometimes the fun in playing with the tone is finding an artist who you kind of play him against type a little bit.
Right.
That helps create a new tone in and of itself.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
part of the fun with seeing Ryan Otley on Invincible get super gory is that he's like a
You just
superhero
wouldn't
artist,
expect it,
and
yeah.
it just you don't
Right.
expect that, and that's a whole different kind of fun.
So I want to talk about writing for artists. I mean, comics aren't comics without drawings, and word balloons and all those other things. But you and your artist are working together, and
In theory.
in theory, yes. So the initial question is, what are you putting in your scripts or your plots, depending on how you're going? How much are you telling your artists that are on the page? How much of it is in conversation that you're talking over the phone? Basically, when you're writing a script, and I guess it changes depending on who your artist is, what your relationship is. But in the spectrum, what is the most you've had to put down on paper, and what is the least you've had to put down on paper to get whatever's in your mind's eye on the page? Or is part of the thrill putting words out there and seeing what that artist does? And again, I know it varies artist to artist. So this is a fairly broad question that maybe you'll get
Varies
us all.
panel to panel. Again, I think it comes down to who your artist is and knowing them. I mean, doing Wasteland, I've been doing Wasteland for so long now. Chris and I did like the first 28 issues together. By the time we got to like issue 15, 16, I knew I could just say, on Michael, grim. And
Sure.
I knew what I'd get back, that's all I had to say. And he knew what I was expecting from that.
Yeah, you got to kind of build a rapport over
Sure.
the course of the relationship.
Yeah.
And
Like
how are
any
you building that rapport? I guess might be the question. How do you build a rapport with your artist so that
Well,
the
you
things
start
that are
you
in your
start
head-
off, at least my experience is you start off writing a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, as Anthony says, you gradually work down to where you're giving them like shorthand on stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
and sometimes I'll ask the artist what, like, I'm writing a book now that I'm writing, Marvel style, just plot first, just to see how that is, because this guy's such a good storyteller. You should try it. It's an interesting experiment.
So who has written something Marvel style?
Yeah. No.
So Anthony, you're the only one who hasn't. Huh?
Do it.
I have got the biggest stick in the world up my ass. I'm really not sure I could let go of that,
Well,
I do kind of a hybrid sometimes. Like,
should we explain what that is, just
Yes,
in
we
case?
should.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
everyone know what that means? Okay,
for-
then
for
skip.
anybody that
wait,
does it.
Some people don't know.
Yeah, Marvel style is where you write a basic plot description of what happens in the issue, and the artist breaks down the panels and chooses the shots, and then the writer comes back over that art and scripts it, puts in the word balloons, narrative boxes, thought balloons if you're going to use them.
And
As a-
it's kind of based on the lore that like Stan Lee used to just kind of like tell people like, hey, these 3 things are happening in this comic book, go home and draw it. And then
Yeah.
because Jack Kirby was amazing, he would take those 3 notes and turn that into
yeah,
Galactus.
it puts the onus on the comic book artist to tell the story, and then the writer then has to, work within that framework, place dialogue, things like that. And then
It's a bit of a misconception, though, because Jack could write.
Yes.
And he was writing.
Yeah.
And if you look at those pages, he was writing his own dialogue. Stan didn't stick to it.
yeah.
But, he's getting across the points that he needs to get across with whatever dialogue he was filling in, and then Stan will go mess with the dialogue
Sure.
or something. But it's not. See, I ran into
like
this
like
one.
like Kirby or Stan would give Jack like a springboard.
They talk about it on the phone,
Yeah.
from what I understand.
And then Jack would actually do the writing.
And
Jack would write it.
Jack was effectively doing what we were just saying about writing the sort of rough.
Yes.
This is
He
what
was
we
doing
need a
the rough.
character to say.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And Stan
Well,
put
no, and
some
it's funny too
zippy
because like
joke in
Keith
there.
Giffen used to work that way too. Like on Justice, I mean, he may still do this, but he would actually like draw like layouts for an entire thing with dialogue
that's right.
suggestions in there, and then someone like Mark DeMatteis would come in and do the more polished version. Of
Right.
It.
Yeah.
So
And Marvel method, as we call it, is completely dependent on the skill of the artist
Yeah.
as a storyteller. I
I
was
only slip into it
Two-
maybe in a pure action scene.
That's what that's the
Because
artist-
then it's like, okay, people aren't even going to be saying very much here. Yeah, and then it's just like,
And so then it's
here's
like
what needs to happen on this page.
right.
And then let them go. And then if
Let
they
them
want more
choreograph
direction, I give it.
Yeah, right.
isn't there like a Mark Miller script out there
Nemesis.
where isn't it where it's like make it look awesome?
Yeah. Yeah. It was like
Isn't that all of them?
I think Robert's done
wa-
that too a few times in Walking Dead.
It was the scene where Nemesis escapes from the prison, And yeah, he wrote just something like, "It is the most awesome fight scene you've ever seen in your life." 2 pages.
That's better.
Back to sleep. Yeah.
I was an assistant at Marvel, and there was a John Byrne script for a Hulk issue that just said pages 3 through 5 fight.
Right. Yeah.
Like not even like an adjective
Not
on
even
how
they
good,
fight.
Yeah, not even how good the fight should be, just fight.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's,
it could be that bare
I'll be
bones.
honest with you, that ain't, that's like lazy.
Oh, that's very lazy. Yes, no question about it.
Paul Smith did that to me when I was doing X-Men First Class, and he said, "Jeff, I have to work Marvel style. That's the way the Galactus trilogy was done." We all brought it out. And he gave me this spiel, and I'm like, okay. And then it was really hard because I was like, wait, how am I don't know what they're going to say. You know, like, because he's filling it in, and then he would, like, just randomly open somebody's mouth, and I'm like,
No, that's the worst. I mean,
I know,
this,
and I was like, Paul, what are they saying? I don't know. Like, that's not what Kirby did. Like, but God, I was just doing gymnastics trying to figure out, like, I wouldn't have her talk here. What's Marvel Girl saying? And, you know, it turned out great, obviously, but still, it's like, this isn't really Marvel style. This is not what they were doing.
It's Paul Smith style.
It's what Paul...
So now, Anthony,
Felt
you've
it
never
was.
done Marvel style. You are writing full scripts at all time. Do you find that what ends up on the page is what you wanted it to be, or?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much, yeah.
No, that's great.
And if it isn't, I ask for corrections. Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, the guys I work with, I generally have been working with a while. And, you know, they know what I'm like and I know what they're like.
They've been beaten into submission?
You're right, yeah. Most of the time, I don't have, you know, heavy notes because they kind of know what I'm expecting to see and I know what they like to draw. So, you know, it's, again, building on that relationship. And
So there's a common.
But to
Yeah.
me, finding the beats and the pacing and sort of the moments in the gutters, you know, between the panels and the scene cuts and things like that, that is part of the writing to me. That's my job. And it's not that I don't think the artists couldn't do it. I absolutely know those guys could do it, but I just feel like I haven't done my job if I don't at least give them an idea of what I expect to see there. Now, if they come up with something better, I always tell my artists, if you have a better idea, if you can frame this scene better, if you have a better idea for a panel composition, anything like that, please go for it, you know. And that does happen, and I'm like, yeah, good call, I like it. But I will always at least put something down so that they can work off it and bounce off it.
Yeah, that's something. It's like everyone always talks about, like how dense Alan Moore's scripts are.
Yeah.
And it's like one of the things that I thought was cool, and like when he first started doing Supreme for us back in the '90s, was, you know, I would get these scripts and read them, and he's actually really generous in terms of what he's providing the artist with, because a lot of the times it's like you'll get like this, you know, 3 pages for one panel, but he's giving you like lots of different, you know, options for what you can or can't put in there. And
Right.
it's not like any of it's just like a, you know, kind of dictatorial, you know, you have to draw this.
Yeah.
It's you know, these are the choices.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And then there's a common refrain when people are trying to become writers in comics, and the refrain is find an artist and start making comics. You've all done creator-owned projects. How are you finding your artists? And how do you test these artists? Do you test them? Do you give them sample scripts? How much of your writing work is involved in selecting the artist, or are you just looking at work and saying, let's give this a run?
You've really got to find books they've already worked on, and that right away weeds out a lot of people because, like, good, this person finished something. They are self-starter. They're probably going to finish my script if you know, and like, you know, and then you can start to work with them, and sometimes you'll see somebody and you can tell that person's going to be really good. They're not quite there yet. I'm going to let them work with Anthony for a couple of years, and then I'm going to swoop in. And sorry.
Yeah, I've taken chances on new guys, but when I'm looking at their samples on DeviantArt or their websites or whatever, I'm looking for quality, but also quantity. You know, if you see a guy who has great pages and he's got 5 pages, then you're like, well, like, I want a body of work, somebody who's drawing new stuff every day, and it shows me that he's hungry and committed and all that kind of stuff. So even if they don't have a finished book, like Jeff said, if they haven't been published before, I at least want some indication that they want it, that they're going to work.
And you
know?
keep things short if you don't know.
Yeah.
Don't give them a whole lot of story.
Right,
You know, it's
right.
just like, let's just do a 10-pager.
Yeah, it's not going to be sign me up for this 25-issue maxi series.
Yeah.
Well, and even guys who have done stuff before, if you're doing something out of their, comfort zone, for
Yeah.
want of a better word, I'll often pick a few pages from the project and say, like, do you want to do these just to see? We've done that with some of my graphic novels at Oni, where we just pick an action scene, a dialogue scene, from random places in the book and say, draw these, just to get a feel for, we know this person can draw, I don't know, raccoons with machine guns, but can they draw two people sat in an office having a really tense conversation, because a lot of artists can't switch that easily between those two extremes. So sometimes you have to do that as well.
Yeah.
So this is a writing question, but an odd one. Where are you writing? Do you sit at a desk? Are you on a computer? You mentioned you start longhand.
Yes, but I do it at my desk.
Jeff, you're in a studio. There's other people around.
I start off, though, in a cafe, like a huge cliche in the morning, because I need coffee. And I go down the street to my little local cafe, and I work for a little bit, because it helps me to, I write until I get stuck. And I get on my bike, and I ride downtown to Periscope. And usually by the time I get there, it's like, good, your new pages have arrived, and I get back on the computer. It's like, I've got more. I loaded up while literally gears were turning. And I've done that before, where I've just kept moving around town all day just to keep stuff going, and it's whatever works for you. But I do find, it's getting into that whole thing where, white noise sometimes will help. You can go mow the yard, and stuff will come to you because your subconscious kicks it out that's been working on. I don't think it helps me. Also, I tend to write a lot of different things, so if I'm stuck on something, I just move on to whatever book something is coming for. It's never in deadline order, unfortunately, but it's better than just sitting there feeling like a loser because I'm not doing anything and nothing's coming. It's just like I want to just be always producing something.
That's what I walk my dogs for. I get up in the morning,
Yeah.
I walk my dogs. That's kind of
Dogs keep the comics industry going.
And I just work in a spare bedroom that's been converted to a study in my house at a desk, whether I'm doing longhand or on the computer. And then I'll walk the dogs again, or go to the gym, or things like that.
Eric, where are you?
Well, at home I have an office,
Right.
and that's where everything kind of comes together at. But generally speaking, I walk to and from work, and that's a mile each way. So I do a lot of writing while I'm walking, which
Sure.
I mean literally like if something comes to me while I'm walking, I will stop, pull out the phone, and start typing it all up. And the great thing is that the way everything syncs together now, that thing goes into a notepad on my computer. I put that into the document. But there's that, and then there's a lot of, I mean it's not actual writing, but the shower is really great.
The shower is unbelievable.
Because I stand in the shower and think.
Yeah.
And I've literally, if I've been stuck on something, I've taken a shower in the middle of the day to just kind of get my head going.
I've heard stories about Aaron Sorkin taking 3 or 4 showers in a day and putting on fresh clothes because that.
I don't think I've ever done 3 or 4 showers, so that's what he's doing that I'm not. So I've got to remember that. Yeah. No, and then the other thing is just stuff comes to you in different orders. It's and if it's not there, then I just stop and do something else.
Yeah, when it's not there, when you hit that point, Jay. Well, first, Jay, where are you writing?
I'm like Anthony. I think I'm at my desk. That's where I do all my writing. I don't go to a cafe. But I do figure out story problems. I run every morning, and that's a lot of times I'll figure out a scene or something that's not working. But I'm at my desk on my computer. I almost never write longhand just because I can type so much faster than I can write.
But that's why I write longhand.
Oh, because you can
slows you down?
I'm a really fast typist, and I deliberately write longhand to slow myself down.
Yeah,
that is interesting.
I just keep an open kind of one document that I just call the story Bible that I just type everything into, like notes and ideas and all that stuff.
Man, that's a good idea because I put everything into different documents.
It's just a giant, ever-moving document.
So you guys have done work outside of comics, and I want to talk about how that affects or doesn't affect, or how it's different. So, for example, Jay, you work in TV, which is a writer's room. There's a group of people that collaborate on these stories, and then you splinter off and write scripts. Anthony, you write for video games and novels. Jeff, you've drawn your own stories, which is, it's still comics, but it's still it's a different experience. And Eric, I mean, you're a publisher, so you're constantly getting stuff shown to you, and you're reading pitches, and you're reading other comics. And in your younger days, you wrote songs. So how is your approach to writing other things bleeding into your writing comics, or vice versa? How do those things influence or affect the other, if they do at all? Or are you so good at compartmentalizing your brains that comics time is comics time and everything else is, you're in the shower?
All day long in the shower.
All day long in the shower.
I think for me,
Writers are some of the cleanest.
yeah.
Super clean.
Well, some of
with
them
lots
are.
of exercise.
Yeah.
I think for me, I've been running creator-owned comics for so long, where there is, especially in Image, no editorial interference or anything, that when I moved into television, having a writer's room has helped to sort of, has prompted me to just kind of up my game a little bit and not just write the first draft of something and have somebody draw it and turn it in and call it good. I mean, I can, even when I'm working on comic book scripts now, I can sort of see and hear the voices of the other writers on the shows I'm working on kind of grilling me, like, hey, you can do better than that, that idea, that's kind of gotten into my head. It hasn't changed the way I write, but it's made me push myself more, I think.
All right. Anyone else want to field this one?
Well, I've like given lectures on how similar game and comics plotting are. The structure of stories in a long-form comic and a video game, very, very similar. But in terms of sort of, I don't know, bleeding into one another, they kind of do a little. I think the main thing is that games, like a bit like TV, it's not a writer's room, but there are lots of people who are stakeholders in this narrative of a video game. The writer is never, ever the most important person on a game. That's always design and visual production. So you do get a certain amount of, you can hear, as you say, people going, well, hang on a second, what about this? But it also brings home to you how freeing comics is.
Well, yeah, that's the flip side of it.
Right.
Is that what makes me love comics so much, is that I can do what I want.
Well, and not just that, but there's also no budget.
Well, that too. Yes.
Nobody's going to turn around to me and say, well, actually, our 3D modeler, is too busy and we can't build this extra character, or we can't have 3 extra tanks, or whatever.
That fight scene.
We can't blow that. We can't blow that building up. Here's one. We can't blow that building up because then the player won't be able to go there. And if we do that, that means the player can't go there before we blow it up either. Like all these weird technical limitations. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. Like strange technical limitations about pathfinding and stuff in games. Don't have any of that. So you can just do, go crazy. So yeah, I guess if anything, it makes me more enthusiastic about doing comics. Coming back to it from outside.
Because of that singular
Freedom.
control and freedom, sure. You guys got anything? Nothing?
I got nothing.
You got nothing? All right. There's 10 minutes left. Do you want to see if anybody in the crowd has questions? Sure. Does anybody have a question? There's a mic back there, so we can pick you up on the feed, and we'll see how many we can burn through, and then we'll plug stuff, and we'll get out of here.
Is there a
Your
dike
name.
leaking? What's that? Never mind.
Your name.
I am Sharnold, and I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about physically how you organize all of your thoughts. Jay, you mentioned you have one document. Eric, you said you have a lot of different documents. An idea comes to you, you write something down on a napkins at Denny's. How do you physically organize all that so that you can come back to it?
Why do we have to be at Denny's?
None of us go to Denny's anymore. And I personally
over my hammy. He loves
It's a classy place.
No,
to
and
write.
also it's like my days of writing stuff on napkins are pretty long behind me with the iPhone. It's like everything goes into the notes on there, and that's the reason why it's like I'll start different notes about different things, and so I wind up with like a dozen different notes about things that are going into the same issue. So yeah, it's that, and then the computer, and then also I have notebooks, but the notebooks are things that I write in kind of more when I'm home in bed, and just I write down dreams, I write down, just stray thoughts or pieces of dialogue and stuff.
Some guys use this dictational software now. I can't remember what it's called.
I just think that's creepy.
It is creepy, and it reads creepy, because I remember sometimes I would get a lot of stuff sent my way at Marvel so I could line up what's going on in other books. and it's a weird formatting thing. It reads like some kind of Proustian kind of just ramble through consciousness, and I'm like, what the hell is this? I don't even know what I'm looking at, and yeah, I can't.
It's kind of like that spam use that was going around like a few years back, where it'd just be these big blocks of text that sometimes accidentally meant something.
Like,
Well, and if you want, I'm going to give you a plug now, because Anthony's website, you have written extensively about your process.
Thousands and
how he
thousands of
organizes his thoughts and just his structure and everything. And so you should, it's just AntonyJohnston.com.
Yeah, it's just my name, AntonyJohnston.com.
And there's really informative, like, detailed stuff about the way he works. So that's more detail you're going to get here. Yeah.
I'm a walking cliche. I have a moleskin. I make all my notes on there, and then I literally type up exactly what I've written in the notebook. And as I'm typing it up, that gives me new thoughts, and I do it in this piece of software called Scrivener, where you can make notes as well as actually writing the script.
But you have like different windows open, and
I've got a whole method.
It's pretty in depth, so I'd check it out. I'm a Word document with that, the one series Bible in it, and then I'll kind of cut and paste that into the script issue, and then just write. I'm really bare bones.
It drives me nuts.
I know. I thought about I should try his style, but I'm like, I don't have hours to learn that. It seems so in depth.
I understand. Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Did we answer the question?
Yeah.
All right.
Hello, my name's Louis. I just was curious about when you're writing something or writing a certain style, do you try and avoid other stories? Or are you concerned about, I'm going to write a crime drama? And then someone's like, hey, you should check out Breaking Bad. And you're like, no, don't want to watch this.
Didn't I see you tweet just the other day about how you've got a space cops story?
Oh, yes, I did. Yeah. I was bemoaning the fact that I have a book that's going to come out from Image. I think August we're talking about doing it.
Is this an exclusive?
I'm not saying what it's called yet or who's drawing it, but yes, and it's a Western police thing, alien planet but Western themes. And Anthony has a book that's police on a space station, and then there's Red City. Is that what it is? That's like a Raymond Chandler on Mars, and I'm just like.
And then, do you also know Kieran has got one called The Heat, which is cops on Mercury?
I didn't. You gotta be kidding.
I think that should be a panel, like the four of you just fighting on stage over who gets to write this story.
I can be the only one.
But the reality of that is, and I was sort of tweeting it jokingly, is that even if we had intentionally sat down to write the same thing, it's never going to be the same thing. It's going to be so different, just because of we're all different, and our artists are all different, and so I never consciously try to avoid something like that.
Ideas are cheap, basically. Ideas are cheap.
Exactly.
Execution is,
And also, it kind of depends on what you're doing. It's like if you already have all your ideas, and maybe you're just kind of like looking to see how something may have worked, like a similar idea, and just like, how did they handle this? Because I don't want to, sometimes you're looking at somebody else's thing saying, I don't want to make the mistakes they made. But then also there's things, kind of specific to what I do, because I've got like magazine articles and interviews and stuff like that are part of the story. For that stuff, I absolutely go out there and read as much other things
you're trying
like
to capture
that.
specific tones.
Like if I'm doing something that's set up to look like a Rolling Stone interview or a Playboy interview or whatever like that, then I'm going to look at those things and say, okay, I want to format this and have it, kind of read the same thing.
That's a whole other panel.
I will say that it is interesting. No one ever says like, but there's already a superhero book at DC. That's never an issue. Like that, there's.
You're right.
There's already a Batman book.
Yeah.
So we have 4 minutes.
But I just want to quickly add a story. Pat Mills, the guy who created 2000 AD and wrote all of the early issues, at a signing years ago, told us that he had spent years not reading other people's comics, not reading any other comics, because he didn't want to be influenced by them. He didn't want anybody to accuse him of, ripping somebody else off. And then somebody at a signing said to him, have you read Halo? What do you think of Halo Jones? And he was like, what's Halo Jones? I've never heard of that. Yeah, and this is one of the greatest, works in British comics. Wow. And that was the point where he was like, okay, maybe I'm missing out. Maybe I'm just being a bit paranoid,
So we literally have 3 minutes left. The tall gentleman was waiting, I'm sorry. Who has a question can be answered in 3 minutes?
This should be a short one. So I've seen, is this on? Doesn't matter. Comics formatting vary widely when I've downloaded like sample scripts from different people. I have nothing to lose, never published a comic, and I'm comfortable with screenplay, and now I have a comic idea. This may be a very rookie question, but I just want to write it and get it out there. I don't really care what it looks like, but some people may care what it looks like. Is there a format I should be using?
No.
Okay.
Whatever works for you.
Yeah,
No,
that's
nobody will care.
And,
the
and,
beauty of
and if you're
comics.
used to screenwriting, it's pretty similar to comics anyway.
Yeah.
There's
I don't-
even like a final draft comic book template, I think.
Yeah, but it's based on the Dark Horse template. It's not very good.
Oh, really?
And you may find that when you work with an artist, you'll find the best format to work with that
Yeah,
person.
it'll evolve as you work. Yeah.
Plug stuff, guys. What do you want to talk? What do you want to tell people to read or buy of yours? Let's start with Jeff.
Buy everything I do, but coming up, I have finally another original creation. I'm working with artist Sandy Jarrell, who worked on some of your Wasteland, and it's a book coming out from Oni later this year called Meteor Men, and it's more of a YA book dealing with how one teenager deals with the invasion of the world. And anyway, I'm very proud of this, and so if you can look for it online as we start showing previews, I'd appreciate it.
My site, again, is AntonyJohnston.com. Information on all of my books and games and stuff is there. If you like post-apocalypse epics, read Wasteland. If you like dark fantasy, read Umbral. If you like sci-fi cops, read The Fuse, and not Jay's new book. I'm sorry, Jay.
No, and you really should read The Fuse because it's very good stuff. It's one of my favorite things that Antony's done so far. And
Oh, thank you. Oh, and I'm in Artist Alley, actually, at table F7, and I have about 50 copies of The Fuse left that I do not want to take home because I live in England. So come by and please and pick them up.
Anthony's
so
just reminded me
are
of
you
something.
offering to give those away? Is that what that is?
Well, I don't know about giveaway, but you know.
Wait, I should have done what Anthony did about promoting a website. At parkerspace.com, I have a section called Scripts where I've been putting up some of my already used printed scripts. So you can compare to the comics, and maybe a lot of people have said that helps. So it doesn't cost anything if you want to just go check it out. I weeded out the embarrassing ones where I put personal notes in and stuff. So, and then you can go track down the comic and see how it was executed. And I find that reverse engineering helps a lot.
Eric, Jay, we're being ushered to close this thing up. So, plug something quick.
Buy Image Comics.
Jay,
I've got Anti-Hero, a monthly series on Comixology that's digital. 99 cents every issue.
and I draw SpongeBob comics. I write SpongeBob comics. I didn't say at the beginning, and I host a podcast called Stuff Said. It's available at stuffsaidshow.com. Jay and Eric have both been on there, and it's long-form conversations. If you like the way we talk about stuff,
Yeah, it's a great
please,
podcast. It's-
check it out.
yeah.
And thank you all. Thank the panel. Thank you. Have a good one.
You can't stop yourself. You just start.
Thank you. I love it. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you guys. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I was a little worried that I was almost going too heavy into artist stuff as a guy who draws, but I tried to like pull back a little bit, like, no, talk about writing. It would be weird to not write comics in terms of visuals. Yeah. Keep all your name tags and put them on your name.
Like a wall, just like a whole scale mill wall.
In case you forget who you are. Yeah, one day. I guess you should add more. I want to smell this antibacterial.
Oh, it's so good.
It must be terrible.
So I
Where do I sit?
Where can we put our bags?
Underneath?
Underneath?
What's this?
I know.
But it glows. It needs to be. It needs to be right here, glowing in front of us. That's true.
I'll get you set up right
What's up, homie?
We're on here.
They called me Justin Price.
I'm sorry.
It's all good.
I may have. That might be my fault.
Autocorrect.
Right now, my phone keeps autocorrecting cosplay to Coldplay.
Yeah. You would think at this point our phones would have learned what
Yeah.
cosplay is.
Well, I did get a new phone, so it hasn't relearned my
Notes.
I'm glad I'm next to
You're
you.
waiting for me. You're just gonna put down cool.
Can I have?
Does that work? Perfect. I'm going to sing my friend's praises.
Can I have the Sharpie up here on Justin?
Yep.
Seriously, I can't see with these contacts at all.
I can't see anything with the lights.
Is there a power outlet somewhere nearby here?
There will be one tucked away underneath the podium.
Okay.
We'll get one each.
We'll find out. If it doesn't work, I think there's enough power.
Now it is.
yes.
I used corrections on it. My name is Justin Price. I'm the long-lost son of Vincent Price. I like gloomy shit and smiling at people, weirdly enough. Hello.
The lights are
Oh,
very.
sexy.
I feel like I'm being interrogated.
Oh, it's plugged in. Okay.
I don't think I'll be able to hide this.
Okay.
Hey.
When you wake it up again.
Oh, wow, that's bright.
Yes.
I don't think I even need this mic.
I don't think you do.
I don't know.
Looks like that now.
Let me know when you're done with the Sharpie.
Does this look bad?
No, but they can still see your real name. So someone will stalk you if they want to.
No, let me just fold it.
You can fold it over and just write it.
They're also going to be, whatever's on here is going to be what's going up on our live feed.
Yeah, so I will just fix it.
Oh, just change it to Justin.
Digital versions also.
Okay. If you can change my name to Justin Prince.
I just want it to be just that.
You did already? And for her, just Riri. R-I-R-I.
Lillian.
You could just flip it inside out and then write your name
Oh,
on it.
is Mary
Oh, that's a great idea.
Sharpie if it's not being used? Oh no, it's being used.
Oh, yeah.
People actually want to see us? Oh, wow.
Hi, people. Why is everybody in the back? Can we-